I'd like to begin this meeting for Bethlehem City Council for Tuesday, September 6th. Will everyone please stand for the invocation to be given by the Reverend Wayne Gillian of University Parish of Holy Ghost Church. Please remain standing for the pledge to the flag, please.
Divine Lord, we gather this evening to be with our mayor and the city council to plan and discuss what is best for the citizenry of our fair city. You are a most welcome guest. Send us your spirit to guide all our deliberations, make them fair and equitable for all of our people. Pray we treat one another with respect that is owed to all your children. Keep our city safe and from all danger from those who would harm us in any manner. We lift up to you our loved ones, pray for our protection upon them. God bless America and the city of Bethlehem. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Eddie couldn't stand it.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Walensky. Present. Mr. DiGiacinto.
Present.
Ms. Dolan.
Present.
Mr. Evans.
How are you?
Mr.
How are you, Tom?
Brown. Mr. Reynolds.
Present.
Mr. Donchester.
Present. We have two citations, one for Ed Retnick and Wayne Bain. I don't believe they're in attendance, so we will forward the citations to them. We'll move to item 4, approval of the minutes of August 16. Any comments? Minutes stand approved. Since a use permit agreement is not required for the M&T appreciation event, Communication 7A and Resolution 11C are removed from this evening's agenda. With that, we will move to courtesy of the floor for public comment on an ordinance or resolution to be voted on by City Council this evening with a 5-minute time limit. Would anyone like to address City Council on an issue that we will be voting on this evening? I don't see any hands raised. I will move into the agenda. Old business members of council. Let me just make 2 quick points. First, I want to thank Cindy and Nan for researching the RSS July feed, and all the information was provided in your packets. I would appreciate it if you would look it over if you have time this week, no later than Monday. And please notify Cindy as to whether you would like that to be placed in City Council's budget for next year, because I would like to send the budget to the administration no later than Monday. There's, I think, 2 or 3 different plans. There's fees, annual fees, so please look it over, and if there's a majority of interest in it, then we will put it in the council's budget for 2012. Any other old business, members of council? We'll move to communications. Communications 7B, City Solicitor, use permit agreement for public property, Greater Lehigh Valley Chamber of Commerce, Bethlehem Fall Fashion Event.
Attached is a proposed resolution and associated use permit agreement for council's consideration. Please place this matter on council's agenda for review and appropriate action.
Any comments? Resolution will be on the September 20th agenda. We'll move to reports. One question maybe for Dennis, since the mayor's not here. The historic area where we always have the flooding, and hopefully I could have more of that this evening, but do they have their own insurance, the historic the partnership, or is that under the city's umbrella? And I'm just wondering, with the constant flooding that we have down there, well, not constant, but it seems like it's annual flooding, how are their premiums?
You know what, I think they have their own insurance, Bob. I'm pretty sure they have for the buildings and the contents. We used to, years ago, reimburse them, but we don't do that any longer. I'm not sure what their contents are, to be honest with you. You're talking about down below here.
Down below by the
Yeah.
obviously, the buildings that get flooded. Could you
I-
check that and get back
Yeah.
to me on that? Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
There's 2 administrative orders. Administrative order number 1370, I hereby reappoint Timothy Wynn Fox, 510 High Street, Bethlehem, to the Fine Arts Commission, and this reappointment is effective through August 2014.
And the resolution to confirm is sponsored by Karen Dolan and J. William Reynolds.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Walensky.
Aye.
Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donchester.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
Administrative order number 1371, I hereby appoint Barbara Pearson, 405 Center Street, Bethlehem, to the Fine Arts Commission, and this appointment is effective through May 2013.
And the resolution to confirm is sponsored by Karen Dolan and J. William Reynolds.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Doncheck.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
Mr. Mayor, anything else?
That's all I have.
Thank you. We'll move to item 9, ordinance for final passage, 9A, bill number 20, amending the community development budget, CDBG, and home programs, final allocation. Bill 20.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, amending the community development budget for 2011, sponsored by Jean Belinsky and Eric Evans.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Doncheck.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
New ordinances, 10A, Bill 21, authorizing intergovernmental cooperation and purchase and sale agreement, East Allen Township and East Allen Township Municipal Authority, purchase of East Allen Township's Municipal Authority water system.
The Council of the City of Bethlehem hereby ordains that there is hereby adopted and ratified an agreement for intergovernmental cooperation between the City of Bethlehem, the Bethlehem Authority, East Allen Township, and East Allen Township Municipal Authority attached, and the mayor and controller are authorized to execute the agreement. The agreement is entered into pursuant to the provisions of Pennsylvania statute. The purposes and objectives of the agreement are to permit the City of Bethlehem Authority and the Bethlehem Authority to acquire the East Allen Township Municipal Water Authority water system. The agreement is subject to all the conditions and terms specified in the Intergovernmental Cooperation and Purchase and Sale Agreement. The duration of the agreement shall be perpetual. Section 7 is the invalidity of any section or provision. Section 7 is the repeal of Bill number 21. Is sponsored by Karen Dolan and Jean Belinsky.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Doncheck.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
Resolutions, 11A, authorizing a use permit agreement for public property, Celtic Fest, 2011, 12, and 13.
Be it resolved by the Council of the City of Bethlehem that the mayor and controller or other city officials are authorized to execute a use permit agreement between the city and Celtic Fest for various public properties, streets, and Sand Island West for the Celtic Classics of 2011, 2012, and 2013. Sponsored by Karen Dolan and Gordon Mauer.
Comments? Ms. Dolan?
I have some questions.
Go right ahead.
I guess these are for Dennis, if you can answer these. Celtic Classic, and it's a little bit hard for me to completely understand exactly where they're bordering with each of these different sites. The Celtic Classic has events scheduled in the same basic area as what Music Fest would call the plots that has the stuff, the world, not world plots, but it's the farthest north of their
Handwork plots
Folks, Mike?
Volks plots. I'm pretty sure that they have a tent at what I think of as folks plots. Yes, Mr. Clark, I think.
Mr. Clark?
I'm not sure. I have to go back and look at the setup drawings that they proposed this year. They typically are on rising
Ralph, you want to go to the
plots.
mic, please? Thank you.
Sorry, they're typically on what we refer to as rice plots down here, the green space, and then directly across the street under the Main Street off-ramp, and in that general area. I'm not sure. I don't recall if they were over the bridge and up around HBI. I don't really think they were, but
They used to be, so I'm just wondering.
what was your question?
Well, if they are or not. The street that I'm sorry, that it's very difficult for me to tell, but the street that has the OBT on it, that is, I thought that would help.
Union Boulevard, Monocacy.
Union Boulevard and Monocacy.
Don't ask how I know that.
So, is there any way to tell here if, this is my concern, is this use permit agreement is for a couple of years, or authorized to execute a use permit agreement, and I didn't even realize that, but when Cindy read it, yes, 2011, 2012, 2013. And I think what we are experiencing in that area is seasonal flooding that we can expect to see on a regular basis. I don't think it's as it used to be, where it was an anomaly. I think it's now the new norm. It's what we have to get used to as the new norm. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to have to, as a city, shoulder the costs of completely evaluating and changing that area dramatically. I think that obviously the dam will be coming out, but it's probably going to happen down the road that that paved area where Volksplatz, if it wasn't paved, it's paved near there, but anything that's paved in that flood zone is going to have to be unpaved, and is going to have permeable surface if we're going to have any hope of saving, protecting historic Bethlehem properties downstream. So,
I don't think they're down that far, Karen.
how
No.
far down are they?
It seems to me they're right across, there's plots down here and then right near the bridge maybe, but I don't think they're down that far. I don't think they're in the Volksplatz area. At least I don't remember it being
How
there.
about handwork plots?
They weren't there last year.
I know they've moved. I
They
remember they
reduced
used to
it.
be.
Yeah, they reduced the size of that.
They redo, yeah, I
It's been a couple
don't
years.
think they are.
One at a time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Joe?
Yeah, they reduced the size of their envelope a couple of years ago due to the ongoing flooding. They're just essentially right underneath the bridge and then going out into the field where the Highland games are.
And
Maybe,
then-
and the parking lot across the street to Main Street, but that's pretty much it.
And in the most recent floods, the multitude of them, has that area been impacted at all, or is that basically remaining dry? The area that you just described?
Underneath the bridge.
It's been fun.
It's been fine.
Some of the water's come up
A little
Yeah,
bit.
6 inches of water got onto that area during the last major storm.
6 inches of water.
Yeah.
How far?
Near the bank of the Monocacy. Yeah.
Overflowing?
It's spread out about 40 feet outside the bank.
Where Vessplatz would be, that sort of that area?
Yeah.
And they do use that area,
Very shallow, didn't use much,
not the,
but water did get out there.
and can I ask
Go
a
right ahead.
question of
Yeah.
Ralph Clark?
Absolutely.
Mr. Clark, what's the status of the dam removal project, and do you think that it will have no impacts, minor impacts, and good impact on flooding downstream?
That's a question that has possible answers, but no definitive answers until we do that work. We actually had a very good meeting last Thursday. I had all of the interested parties on site for about 3 hours. I had the Army Corps of Engineers, I had DEP, I had Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission, I had Charlene from partnership there. And we talked about the dam removal and what potential beneficial impacts it may have. While we do think there's a possibility it will help with the flooding to some extent, I couldn't tell you by percentage or any other measure how much. You have to realize that that's all a floodplain. That old district there is actually 13 feet higher. 13 feet higher today than it was when it was originally built. I would presume that most of that is from alluvial soils moving in every time it floods and settling. There's obviously, in our opinion, a significant increase in stormwater coming into the city than there has been in years past. We hope that taking the dam out will be the first measure to ameliorate the flooding down there. I can't say to what extent. I think that there certainly needs to be further things looked at after the dam comes out, and we evaluate what other measures we can take to try to expand the stream's capacity to carry water or to detain water upstream that will help alleviate some of the nuisance flooding we're seeing now from these what are kind of minimal storm events. 2-inch storm event that sends the creek over its banks. So.
Thank you. I understand was that maybe it wasn't this meeting, but a recent meeting, that there was question of whether the dam that we're talking about, the one in Johnson Park, was historic and therefore couldn't be removed. Is that true, or is there some way around?
The dam is part of the historic district, which encompasses all of the colonial industrial quarters, and there's no ambiguity on PHMC's part as to whether that is considered historic. As with the walls, as with the Stone Arch Bridge that dates back to 1760, and all the original buildings. So it is part of a historic registered district, and therefore is considered historic.
That doesn't necessarily mean that it can't be removed, though.
No, we reached a verbal agreement on how we could move forward with a memorandum of agreement between the city and the Army Corps and PHMC last week, and we have to go back and codify that and get that down on paper and describe that and get that reviewed and approved and accepted by Army Corps of Engineers and DEP and PHMC. So that's the path we're going to follow.
That is a very difficult path. I wish you well on that one. Is there still the funding from American Rivers and the Anti-Dam Foundation? I can't remember what they're called. Is that still in place, or?
We have 2 grant applications out right now. I haven't heard back on either. One is funding through NOAA, and it's pass-through money to American Rivers, and the other is DCNR. So we haven't heard. I'm hopeful and confident that we'll get those funds to do the job, and they pretty much help us fully fund the dam removal, and we'll move forward once we get those approvals in place from the Army Corps and everybody else, and the funding in place. Our timeline for construction on that would be probably in July of next year.
May I ask one additional question? I know how forward-thinking you are, so I'm wondering if you would share with us your thoughts on long-term solutions to like what you call nuisance flooding, because there really is, there's no way to move backwards on it. Nothing's going to happen that's going to make it so that we don't continue to have this nuisance flooding. It's, no matter what causes it, we don't need to debate it, it's what's happening. Is your office thinking about, and before I preface that, it's incredibly expensive. It's a huge drain on the city, and it will only become a bigger drain on the city if we're constantly having to react to these events that are occurring more and more frequently. What, have you had any professional meetings to look at restrictions, for example, on Music Fest? other festivals for use of that flood zone, and perhaps treating that flood zone more at, in other words, assisting the flood zone to do what it's designed to do by nature, and therefore protecting downstream structures, historic structures. What are your thoughts on that general subject? Are we thinking ahead here, or are we going to be in reactive mode for a little while longer?
I would say in answer to that, without trying to, box myself in on specifics, we've had lots of conversations with professionals, Army Corps, DEP. I've had Mike on the site, and he and I have kicked ideas around. Mike is much better versed and trained to speak to stormwater issues than I am, but I think we all agree that taking some measures is better than sitting there with our hands in our pockets. I think certainly taking the dam out may prove beneficial. I can't guarantee it. I'm hopeful. We'll see how that goes. Most of the opinions I've had from these professionals think it might help, quote unquote, might help. So we'll see. Are there other things we can do by restoring the riparian buffer along that stream to, deliberately put some plants in there and things that are going to take up more storm water? Yes. Is it probably a good idea not to program events down there? Yes. There's lots of other possible ideas. We'll have to see how the stream carves and how things flow after we do this first measure. My opinion, I think it's a larger, more regional issue that we have to tackle and try to go after from a broader level, county, state.
I just encourage you to take whatever measures are necessary, and along the lines of a regional approach, that is ideal. But if we can't summon up the regional approach in an adequate timeline, I think we still need to protect the city of Bethlehem. I don't think that that's a bad idea, although of course the regional approach is best, but it breaks all of our hearts too many times to see those pictures of those buildings underwater. And I don't know that regionally anyone is going to care as much as we do. So, you've got definite support I think on this council. I think strong support. We're entering budget time, and maybe stormwater protection might be taken more seriously by this council if we're looking at taking some measures that are clearly going to make a difference. There are some things we could do that definitely would make a difference. There's pretty much no doubt there are a few measures we could take that would definitely make a difference.
I think so too. We do have an application into DCNR to DEP for growing greener funds to take some first step measures in the Monocacy Park section that will enhance that stream corridor from Illick's Mill going up to the dam, that will hopefully allow that area to be able to receive stormwater a little bit better and detain it a little better and release it a little more gracefully. So, we're taking some measures. It's just, I think, given budget constraints and everything else, it's going to be smaller steps rather than bigger steps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Blinsky. Aye. Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 pass.
11B, authorizing use permit agreement for public property, Arts Quest, Fall 2011 Steel Stacks Festival / events.
Be it resolved by the Council of the City of Bethlehem that the mayor and controller or other city officials are authorized to execute a use permit agreement between the city and Arts Quest for First Street from Founders Way east to the eastern terminus for the various fall 2011 Steel Stacks festivals and events, sponsored by Karen Dolan and Gordon Maurer.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Maurer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Doncheck.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
11D, transfer of funds, limited fixed-term contracts.
Be it resolved by the Council of the City of Bethlehem that $13,010 in the general fund budget be transferred to the temporary help accounts for financial services, human resources, planning and zoning, and fire from the various professional services, temporary help and operating supplies accounts in order to ensure that funds remain for the contract positions, sponsored by J. William Reynolds and Eric Evans.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Doncheck.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
11E, transfer of funds, EMS, temporary help.
Be it resolved by the Council of the City of Bethlehem that $67,775 in the general fund budget be transferred to the EMS temporary help account from the overtime equipment and other expenses accounts in the EMS to provide additional funding needed in the account. 11E is sponsored by J. William Reynolds and Eric Evans.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Doncheck.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
Chair will accept the motion to consider resolutions 11F through 11J from Mr. Mauer, seconded by Mr. Evans as a group, and I ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion and to read the resolutions.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Doncheck.
Aye.
All are certificates of appropriateness under the provisions of the Act of the Pennsylvania Legislature and Bethlehem Ordinance. 11F, a proposal to replace 5 ground lights with taller, fuller lights at the Central Moravian Church at 418 Main Street. 11G, to install 7 tables and 15 chairs on the sidewalk at 520 Main Street. 11H, to replace the existing vinyl siding, install new composite wood trim and pilasters, install lettering above the transoms and a projecting sign at 425 to 427 East 4th Street. 11I, to install a new sign at 118 East 3rd Street. 11J, to install window signage at 15 East 3rd Street. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Bethlehem that certificates of appropriateness are granted for the proposals, sponsored by Karen Dolan and David DiGiacinto.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Doncheck.
Aye.
7-0 they pass.
We'll move to new business with committee announcements. City Council will meet as a committee of the whole on Tuesday, September 27 at 7 p.m. in Town Hall to continue to review the proposed new zoning ordinance. Mr. DiGiacinto?
There will be a Public Safety Committee meeting on Thursday, 8 September at 7 p.m. in Town Hall. We will accept public comment and discuss the Dewberry Fire Station and EMS Center.
Thank you. Mr. Reynolds?
There will be a Finance Committee meeting on, I believe it's Thursday, Monday, September 26, 2011, at 7 p.m. in Town Hall on the 2010 audit. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other new business, members of council? If not, we will move to courtesy of the floor, a 5-minute time limit on any subject. Anyone like to address City Council?
All right.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Good evening. Eddie Rodriguez, 701 Main Street, Bethlehem. I came here with to discuss another matter, but I think I got my answer with speaking for a moment with Mr. Schiffer, so I'm satisfied for now. But with regards to what Ms. Dolan was talking about, the Monocacy Creek, that's also a concern of mine, because I took pictures, and I also called Mr. Grubb in reference to this and had a couple of talks, with respect with him. But You know, I see a couple problems, you know. One is that I called Mr. Clark, also Parks Department, and my concern was, while taking some pictures, was the reasons why some of these areas were flooding. One is under the Union Boulevard. Well, let's go back a little further. Silk Mill area. You got a couple of trees that are toppled over on top of all the trees. That's one problem. And when those trees, they soak up, in days where they have a lot of flooding, they have a tendency to run downstream. And that also clogs up under the Union Boulevard Bridge. That's why I called Mr. Clark, to get those stumps out of there. But then the city pursued on getting a crew down there, and what they did was they cut inside of the creek one